Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
I cannot get over how quickly the summer is going. It's almost the end of July already.
Oh, it's going very fast.
I really have enjoyed it. It's been really nice. Despite the bad air and the difficulty, we've still had a lot of time to get out and do some kayaking and do some walking
And biking?
all kinds of things.
Oh, I've just had a great time, and I love being outside during all this time and just really enjoying it. Yeah, I can get on that bike, and I can go 10, 20 miles, and I love it. It's a wonderful time.
It reminds us of how good it is just to be alive and to be able to have our relationships. We want to talk about important things about relationships right after this.
A couple came to visit us, spent the night, and they're good friends of ours. We've known them for many years. I mentioned him because he was the very first person that I told that I had a daughter that was transgender. The very first person outside of mom and me. We've seen him a few times after that. But when they came to visit us this time, I said, hey, we're doing a podcast. This is really fun, and it's really interesting, and we've got a lot of followers right now, and it keeps growing. We've got people from every continent in the world except Antarctica. We don't have any listeners.
I have to work on that. See what we can do. If you would like to move to Antarctica to be our first listener, please email us and let us know.
When I told him, he said, well, I don't really understand that because I don't know anybody that's gay. I don't know anybody that's lesbian. I don't have any contact with people like that. So when he came this time, he was very interested in our podcast because he told me, well, my daughter is a lesbian. She came out, and I know she's going to be really interested in this. And I want her to hear all of this. And he was all excited about it. It was wonderful. Let me tell you guys, everybody knows somebody. Maybe they didn't come out, and maybe they did. You just don't know it. But everybody knows somebody. He was like me in that way. When his daughter first came out, he was immediately accepting. That made a lot of difference in the way he reacted to what we are doing now. He is clearly like an instant ally. It's wonderful.
It's hard to be an ally right away with a lot of the misinformation that's going on out there. You discovered this article, a really important article here, called The Truth About Common LGBTQ Misconceptions by A.J. Willingham and Scottie Andrew. This was published on CNN. This was about a year old. We wanted to talk about this because there are so many anti-LGBTQ misconceptions that are out there that you don't even realize that this is inaccurate or it's a problem. But if you take the time beforehand to clear it up, then when that person comes out in your life, you're ready to treat them with a lot more dignity and respect than maybe you could have beforehand because you've already done some of that work on your own.
They throw some statistics in here, too, like the podcast we had just a couple of weeks ago about statistics. But they say, for example, that more than 20 million Americans identify as LGBTQ+. And that's according to a 2021 analysis of census data by the Human Rights Campaign. And it's a pivotal time to protect and expand LGBTQ rights. This is the time.
There's a lot going on politically where the rights of LGBTQ people are put out as, rather than us being treated as people, we're being treated as political pawns that are put out there. If you actually care about LGBTQ people, get out and vote. And if you care about our children and protecting our children from this menace of whoever some people think we are, you better get out there and vote.
Yeah.
And the reality is we just want to live. We just want to experience our life. The first misconception that they're addressing is if you come out, you can't be a person of faith.
Imagine they make that leap from one to another. Now, what this survey has found, they have found that 47% of LGBTQ adults say that they're religious. Now, that's a little bit different from what I would say. People use that word, I'm religious. I always, in my mind, thought of that as I'm acting the part. I never say that about myself. I don't say I'm religious. I would prefer to say I'm a person of faith. A person of faith never puts on a show. A person of faith is just themselves. This is what God made me. This is who I am. I don't act different around my pastor. A whole lot of people do.
And what they're addressing here is the idea that you can still be the same as you were beforehand. There are the misconception is that once you come out, churches are not going to accept you. Places of faith are no longer places for you. And what we're discovering is that there's actually an overwhelming number of churches where you are welcomed, where you are affirmed, where you're brought right in. And in fact, they talk about Sarah Tevis Towns, an ordained minister of the United Church of Christ, is one of the people that support. That's one of the voices that they talk about specifically. She says the early church affirmed women and recognized gender beyond the binary. Today, most mainline Christian denominations affirm LGBTQ people, but the church has made a lot of mistakes, and in other Christian practices, there's no accountability. Now, when I was originally thinking I might go on for myself and go to seminary, I was actually going to UCC seminary, a very strong denomination, but there are a lot of places that you can go now. So those days where LGBTQ people are not accepted, that is not how things are.
No, and so many churches are changing the way they react to those kinds of things, and they're much more welcoming. In our particular denomination, there is a transgender person at a very high part of the church, and very well accepted.
The next misconception: if you come out, it means you can't have a family. This is a misconception that is not just outside of the LGBTQ community, but many people that are part of the community, especially if you've been in the closet a long time, you're assuming if I come out, if I let people know that I'm gay, if I come out and I have a boyfriend, or if I have a girlfriend, or if I come out as transgender, it destroys my chances at ever getting married and having children of my own.
According to a Gallup poll in 1921, 1 out of 10 LGBT adults in the U.S. are married to a same-sex spouse. 1 out of 10.
It's becoming much more commonplace. Now, that doesn't always mean that things are easy, and we'll talk about that on the fifth misconception. There is a lot more visibility and a lot more opportunity for us to just be treated as a part of the society, and that's what we really want.
And why can't we allow people to do that? It has already been shown also that the people who are married have reported being happier and more satisfied with their lives. Why shouldn't we allow people to do that? I mean, that's fine.
When I transitioned, I had already had my children, and then I went through my life change a little bit later on. And so for me, I went through and thinking, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get to live my most authentic life earlier. But I know as I've told my story to a lot of other people, they've looked at me and said, boy, I'm really, envious of the fact that you've been able to have this family. But now as we're seeing, especially older LGBTQ people from times when it was not considered as acceptable. But now as we see young people coming in, we see lots of families forming in lots of ways that gay and lesbian couples or transgender couples. I have a close friend, they're couples, it's 2 trans women that are married, and they're the cutest couple, and I'm really so happy for them. We see lots of ways that newer families are coming together where people just get to be themselves. And it's no longer the roadblock that it was before. It turns out, they say in this study, they say all of this shows that when people have rights, they use them. When we were given the right to finally be married, we got married. And we started to find ways that we can have children and that we can live the same as everybody else.
There have in the history of time, things like that have occurred continually. When when women got the right to vote, they voted. When they got the right to be able to run for office, they ran for office, and that's continuing to grow. When they were finally accepted as doctors, they became doctors. I mean, it just goes on and on. And sometimes you get really, really surprised by something. Why, I had a waitress one time that was a woman. Can you imagine?
Next misconception has to do specifically with transgender people. And this is one that I get frequently. That people will ask me, not so much anymore because people have started to understand, but especially early on, people would say, have you gotten the surgery? Or are you going to get the surgery? As if being transgender was all about this pinnacle of being transgender, was going to the doctor and having this certain surgery.
In pursuit of living a more authentic life, some, but not all, trans and non-binary people might change in their clothing, their appearance, their pronouns, or their name, and all of those things constitute a person's transition. And there's a lot of things about questioning the validity of transgender experiences, but they focus on the surgery or the medical transitioning, which would be taking the drugs, etc.
Early on in my transition, I met somebody through work at a convention, and I mentioned, I'm actually looking to transition shortly, and she said, "You're kidding. Are you just saying that as a joke?" And I said, "No, I'm actually really excited because this has been a long time coming." And she said, "Well, I'm actually trans." And I said, "You're kidding. I would, if you wouldn't have told me, I wouldn't have realized." And she said, "We should get together and have a weekend, and I'll teach you all kinds of things." And so we got together, and she showed me how to some makeup tricks and a variety of other things. But she told me, I don't take any hormones.
Right.
I'm not having any surgeries. I'm not going through any of this stuff that people have. And yet I still just get to live my life as a woman. And these misconceptions that people have about who I must be because I'm transgender, none of it is true. I'm still just the same me that I was, just the most authentic.
Sure, and there are a lot of transgender people like that who have done all the other parts, but they haven't had the hormones, they've not had their surgery, and yet if you ask them, they think that's an improper question, and it is.
You'll sometimes hear people talk about gender affirming care, and we're really very, very grateful for gender affirming care. But the assumption is that gender affirming care means, especially when we start talking about children, it means that we're putting them on dangerous drugs, or we're trying to bring them in to doctors and have some kind of surgery and not tell the parents and do all this stuff. Oftentimes, gender affirming care just means making sure that they can see a therapist, or having somebody call them the name that they prefer to be called. There are a lot of ways to address gender dysphoria, and not all of them are this wide solution. Everyone is different, and everyone needs something different.
But there has been a study out there, however, that found that trans adults who started hormone treatments as teenagers were less likely to experience thoughts of suicide compared to those who wanted but never accessed hormone treatments. But they wanted them. That's the difference. There are some people that don't want anything to do with that.
And people will rightly say that we need to be careful about steering kids and saying, "Oh, well, you've expressed some gender issues, therefore you must need this medication and that thing and this thing." And that is true. But oftentimes that gets blown way out of proportion, as if all of the gender affirming care that's out there is, oh, well, you came to me and expressed that, you don't feel comfortable in the gender expression that many people of your gender have, and therefore the right answer for you is let's transition you. Nobody is out there transing kids. But a lot of kids are coming in saying, I have an issue. And we just want everybody to be protected and not have to be pushed into a box.
And I think there are people who are concerned.
Nobody is out there trying to trans kids.
Right.
We're trying to protect kids and keep kids that are the most vulnerable among us from going down those paths of despair that we did in the past because there were no avenues for us.
It's really what this podcast is about, saving lives.
Another common misconception is, all of this gender stuff is new. Somebody goes online and they find an article about, now there's 52 new genders, and isn't this funny? And look at all this goofy stuff. I saw a T-shirt that said, there's man and woman, and then the left made up all of these things. Ha 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 ha. But that is a misconception. What's the truth, Dad?
The truth is that it's never been binary. Sex has never been binary. Transgender is a relatively new term, but the people who are that way have been that way. That we're fairly common. We're fairly certain that this has happened for thousands of years. As people living the life that they feel is they're most comfortable with.
Every society has different ways of treating the human experience.
Yes.
In some societies, different things are treated in different ways. What marriage looks like right now in our society is very different from what marriage looked like 2,000 years ago, and very different from what that looked like 4,000 years ago. Even the people that are saying we need to keep things traditionally how they were, well, if you go back, you and I could both open our Bible and show, well, what was Abraham's conception of marriage? And not Abraham. Abraham only was married to one woman, but
he had another one on the side.
That's right. He had a concubine.
Yeah.
And all throughout the whole thing, conceptions of marriage have changed. And how things were is not necessarily always the best. And transgender people have always existed. And non-binary people have always existed. We just now have developed some categories that are helping people like us to be more acceptable and to have language to express, hey, you know what? Here's who I really am.
They say that up to 1.7% of the population are born with an anatomy and chromosomes and hormone functions that are outside the typical notions of male and female bodies. That's according to the UN. So, because these variations occur naturally, there's every reason to believe that they existed throughout history, even before science had the tools and the language to identify them. And even in societies that are intolerant of that.
They represent, or the article references two historians, very famous. If you go into bookstores and you go over to the LGBTQ section, you'll see both of these historians there, Susan Stryker and Jules Gill Peterson. Susan Stryker wrote a book called Transgender History, and Jules Gill Peterson wrote a book called Histories of the Transgender Child. And both of them demonstrate that nothing is new here. We've seen things all right along. We may have had different language to describe it. We may have viewed it differently, but the experience has been the same from as far back as we have recorded history.
Let's talk a little bit about visibility. there is strength and visibility as more people are coming out, as more people are saying different things, and visibility helps to create acceptability.
That brings us to our last misconception, that the more people see LGBTQ people in media, that means the better it's going to get. And that's a partial truth. But that's not the whole truth, is it? Visibility is not enough. Now, visibility is important, but we need more than visibility. Because anytime you have a marginalized group of people that becomes more visible in society, there's always a backlash from some people that say, hey, that's not how things were before, and everyone used to look like me before, and now I see all these people that don't look like me. And the fact that they don't look like me must mean that they are bad people, and that stirs them up in their hatred.
And that's true in every aspect of life. People do not like change. And it's happening right now. There is a situation right now where you may be aware of this if you're a baseball fan. The rules changed in baseball this year a lot, and it makes things a whole lot different. And I think it makes it better. It makes it faster. It makes it more interesting. But there are people who say, well, that's not the way baseball is played. Well, it is now. And basically, most people are embracing that because they realize it's really better. And those of us who are allies to the community realize that it's better for them. What's better for them? We see it, we know it, and as we honestly embrace it, not playing the game, but honestly embracing it, they become so much more comfortable with their own life because they realize they're normal. You can't really separate them in any other way than you can separate somebody who says, we're going to change these rules in baseball. Are they not normal anymore? Of course they are. They just made the change. So that's my pitch.
And of course, you can go back and listen to our episode from a few weeks ago with Pete Gasper, asking, is this unnatural? Is it unnatural to be gay? Great conversation that we had.
Yes, Dr. Gasper really helped us out there.
We have seen as more and more LGBTQ people have come out, as there's been these hard-won advances, there is a backlash. And about 70% of LGBTQ people reported experiencing targeted discrimination in 2021, according to a report from GLAAD, G-L-A-A-D. That's a 24% rise since just 2020. So there's a lot positive going on. But there is backlash, and that's why it's so important to have you as an ally out there supporting us, supporting the person that you didn't know is gay or lesbian in your life. It's important to be recognizing that you don't know. In fact, you and I were just talking about this the other day, Dad, that it used to be easy to just crack a joke here and there at the expense of LGBTQ people, whether it's a transgender person or a gay person or a lesbian person, until you realize, oh, there's a lot of people all around. Oh, one of my closest loved ones is in that group that I was just making fun of.
Exactly.
Oh, my friend over here. Oh, my friend's daughter. And it multiplies very, very quickly.
And one of the ways you can support is to speak out, to say something. That's not easy to do. It took me a long time to get to that point. But if it happens now, I speak out.
It's not easy for anyone. And that's why we're so grateful to have you listening to this podcast as we come and discuss these things. We obviously don't have everything all down. We're still sorting through, and we have a lot of pieces, Dad, you and I, as we're talking. We've learned a lot of things just through this podcast. And we're hoping that you have learned right along with us, that you've gotten some ideas for yourself of ways that you can be an ally and that you can help make things better, because that's really what we want.
I want to ask you, have you listened to anything here that made you think, I wish they'd talk about this. Tell us what that is, because if you don't tell us, we don't know. So if there's something we haven't addressed, let us know. We'll do the research, we'll find it out, and we'll do a podcast about it. And then we will be just so happy that you are telling us how to do this, because that's what we want to do. We want to give you the information you seek.
We've got one actually that has just come up. People were asking about this first point with the LGBTQ people and religion. And so we've got next week, we have an Episcopal priest that will be joining us talking about LGBTQ issues in the church. We're very excited about that one. You're going to want to tune in for that one.
Yes.
If you have other things you'd like to hear, you can email us. Our email address is transcendent@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you go out there and strengthen your relationships and fill your week with positivity.
See you next Monday.